Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and if you were to just go by what you see here in this tray, the color assortment of the foods I'm giving my worms today, you would think that I would be feeding my yellow buckets, since all the food they're getting today is yellow. But that's not true. I already fed my yellow buckets earlier this week. The ones that are getting fed are actually down on the ground. One of them is the one where you can clearly see the feeding zone indicator is off on one of the sides. The other one's covered with cardboard, but on that one too, the feeding zone indicator is off center because those are the two systems that we're considering as our back and forth systems. Or, well, I guess in the case of one of them, I had started out calling it a ping pong system. And then in the other one, we started using fabric and cotton, fabrics, and twine as sort of test bedding materials. Each of these bins has been getting fed back and forth for a while now, and since they're getting fed back and forth, we sort of paired them up to be fed at the same time. So it's been 10 days since they last got fed. I'm going to get them up on the bench and give them some of this yummy yellow food. Let me get on the glove and we'll get to work. So now here in the older of the two bins, the 219-day-old bin, this thing started in mid-January. We're now in mid-August, 7 months in progress. That's a pretty substantial period of time, and just the fact that we're in excess of 200 days is pretty unique, because in my system most of the time by this time I would have already tried to bring clothes to my worm bin at that age, but I've been attempting to just go a little bit longer in most of my systems, and I think unless I feel like I'm getting pushed towards finish by whatever, some sort of a motivational force, I see no problem in just continuing as is. Not sure how or why, but that top surface got really full of debris. It looked to me like there may have been a dead worm here. And it's hard to say, since you're on the floor, you never know if it's a dead worm from within the system that crawled on top of the paper to dry and die, and then whatever, or was it just a worm wandering in a bin from a shelf above and dropped down in onto the dry cardboard and got in trouble there. The white powder is diatomaceous earth. It was part of maybe an insect campaign trying to rid insects. So I don't know, I guess something to look around for to see if we've got any signs of distressed worms in here other than what we saw on the top surface, which might not even be applicable to this system. So as you've probably gathered, the whole back and forth, that whole back and forth thing is just alternating the feeding zone from one side to the other. Since the bin was fed on this side most recently, it's the reason we're seeing some nice damp castings there. And that cardboard covering, it does allow for a pretty good bit of airflow. So the material out here on the surface is even a little bit dry right below the cardboard. As you kind of near the cantaloupe that was fed in here last time 10 days ago, you can see moisture. I don't know if the colors are coming through on the camera, but you can see darker material here, and as you work your way away from the feeding area, things do seem to get lighter in color and drier. So we'll be opening this side up at the end to feed anyway. So let's save that for last. I'm curious to see how these cantaloupe rinds are doing after 10 days. One of the metrics you saw on the board was the worm count. That was the 1334 for this system. The other system has a larger estimated worm count in it. So there's a lot of worms down in here doing their thing. A lot of the bedding we used in here looks like it was just big chunks of paper, stuff that you could just, pull right out, and then all you're really left with is just a wad of worms. That's so nice. And a whole bunch of castings. They're doing a number on this cantaloupe rind feeding. I'm gonna save the other half for another shot. Let's let these guys settle down. Oh, I just got to thinking. I was at first going to put this recycled bedding and whatever into the stuff over here that we might use to rebuild the feeding area on the opposite side, but I like the idea of just keeping the materials that were placed in here where they were, you know. So leave them right there where those wormies can get right back at what they were enjoying there. Let's see. The only thing we're going to relocate is this object here, which is what's left of a pumpkin stem. So we've got novelty items in here. You might have even seen reference to the other novelty item in here. That's the cork. So we'll probably stumble on that too soon. We traditionally just go ahead and keep those objects moving with the most current feeding area. So I'll just do another one of these little cheesy fast forward clips of what we observed on the opposite side. Look at that piece of cantaloupe rind. Stripped clean of all the yummy stuff. And they'll work that tougher portion of it down too over time. So they're not quite done, but they're close. So after 10 days, they've done pretty good. Let's see what's happening on this edge, and then we'll proceed to applying the feeding to the other side. Yep, a little bit more leftover cantaloupe rind, but nothing of the sweet fruit. They've stripped that clean off of it. Look at that. That's just leftover paper and cardboard. All right, wormies, settle down. We'll reset your feeding space and leave you be so we can get the feeding put on the other side. Let's also bring in some newspaper. A whole bunch of bedding to nibble on over here. That will pretty much cover up that whole bottom layer there. Why don't we start dropping in their food? Perhaps we'll put these corn bits down low and then just try to increase the interest of that food at that layer at least, with a little bit of grit, a little bit of worm chow. And even though I try to steer away from adding moisture, it does seem like these two pieces of newspaper that we're going to be dropping in down here being dry, it wouldn't hurt to, you know, moisten them up a little bit, just so they don't become sponges and start sucking moisture from the surrounding materials. I like the moisture content of the surrounding materials. I wouldn't want to see them dry off any further than they already are. And I think this is just like a little bit of cheap insurance to make sure that that doesn't end up happening. Alright, so now the other food item is a couple of banana peels. And even though we think we've got a slightly larger population in the other system, we've pretty much equally divvied up the food. I don't know, it makes me wonder, should we take back one piece of peel from each of the banana peels and just by that much increase this feeding for the other bin? I don't know, it does seem like we've got a slightly larger population living over there. Might not hurt to give them just a little bit more. A little bit more of my worm chow. I'm starting to run low, but I am tooling up to prepare another batch of this stuff soon. So I'm not worried about being generous with it. And I don't know, I did bring over another piece of newspaper. Should I just go with it? I think we should. And I've still got my prepared bedding, so we can even do more. So hopefully no one thinks that I'm going overboard. I think there's just a general understanding in worm farming that you could pretty much, alright, go ahead, say it with me for 3, 2, 1. You can never have too much bedding. Alright, enough of this silliness. Let's restore some of these novelty items we've been tracking. Maybe a little bit more worm chow in between the layers of boring paper, just so we've got a reason to come in with one last sheet and drop that on top. And that looks a little unsightly. I'm thinking perhaps a little bit more of my prepared bedding would be a nice topping for this, and I got a feeling the worms are going to appreciate that, just for the bedding content. And the food items, especially those corn cobs, those things are going to be in there for quite some time. So we'll be checking back in on that side. Probably we'll let another interval go. We'll feed over here, and by the time we come back here to feed again, I'll bet you those corn cobs will still be lingering in here. Getting worked down by the wormies. So we will cover up here with some finished castings, just to give the whole thing a nice natural appearance. Yeah, I like that. Nice looking ping pong bin. Now receiving its 18th feeding at day 219. Let's bring back the feeding zone indicator. Show we fed here last time in this cardboard coverings. It's been doing so well. We'll go right back. All right, let's go get the other one. Okay, so this one only came maybe a month later, I think. Month and a half later, thereabouts. So now this system being 186 days of age, it's getting its 16th feeding today. And this is the side we fed on. That means we'll go to this side at the end to pop in today's feeding. The other thing we've been doing lately, for a while we always kept twine on one side, cotton on the other side. But the twine has been pretty much gone for a number of weeks now. So it was during probably the last feeding, I believe, that we made the decision just to keep with the back and forth pattern of feeding in an alternating location each time. But we've written the twine off as gone, and all we've been doing is moving the cotton materials that still have a little bit of ways to go to getting done. We've been moving that stuff back and forth with the feeding, kind of like we've been moving the novelty items in the other bin, the cork and the stem, with the feedings, just so that those I guess novelty items were always at the heart of the action, you know, near the most recent feeding. So the most recent feeding here too was the cantaloupe rinds placed in on this side. My guess is we're probably going to see another worm party. Why don't we do another one of our little fancy unearthings of the action / aeration to give it a technical reason to get done. But since I'm suspecting a good number of worms down here, I think we'll do just a little worm spotting before we move over to apply today's feeding. There again, I'm just anticipating that we're going to see some good worm action. I sure hope we do. But I've been disappointed in the past. It wouldn't be surprising for it to happen another time here. Yeah, look at that. Just get rid of the large chunks of paper and you're left with the worm party. All right, we'll take a closer look at these little guys in a moment. Oops. And then we'll have to extract all this cotton material too. We have pieces of sock. Man, is this so weird how light it is. Just getting nibbled away. And then here, another piece of sock. These you can tell are the part that goes around your foot with this darker tip that goes around your toes. Slightly different color fabric. These parts don't have any elastic in them, but then the other pieces that go up your calf and hang onto your leg prevent the sock from slipping down do have elastic in them, and I'm expecting that elastic material might not get eaten. It might just be left behind because I think it might not be a natural fabric. It's just mixed in there with the cotton, and I keep running into a little piece of elastic something keeps getting caught on my pinky, and I keep dragging on it. My goodness. I've seen this in other worm channels where people have composted fabrics and have seen this happen, but this is the first for me, so this is something else. Look at that. So there is this probably much more elastic material in this one part that's around the very top of the sock. And you can see a few worms still hanging out in this stuff, but this is what's left of the part that goes around your calf that has the elastic material in it. I'm wondering if all this is elastic stuff that they're not going to eat, or if they're going to keep nibbling away on it, since there's 1 or 2 worms still hanging out in it. My guess is that they've still got a little bit more work to do. So sorry for me gawking there for a little while. I don't think I've ever seen any fabrics in my bins, at least, get worked down quite nicely as that. I did make it one try at composting fabrics once in the past, and I ran into issues, had to abandon the test. So I'm really glad to see that this attempt is working so nicely. And it's just interesting how these pieces are obviously getting worn too, the ones that don't have elastic in them. The worms are working it for sure. You could just feel it when you lift it, how much lighter it is than it had been. Just one, it's just weird, I guess, how it seems like they're going for the elastic stuff somehow more, in a way. Or maybe it just seems that way because there's so much elastic material that they're eating. Ooh, yeah, little spider must have gotten disturbed from me being so rough in here. So yeah, I don't know, I was kicking around to brainstorm on why I'm seeing what I'm seeing there, but that's just me thinking out loud like I always do. So stuff like this, leftover banana peel for this side, can stay on this side. And if we were to play back some old videos or something, we'd see when that was added. I don't recall when that was in there, but just based on its progress, I would say it's been in there for a while. I can start putting this paper back down as I confirm. Oh, and these, yeah, cantaloupe rinds too. All I'm really looking for are the leftover fabric bits that we're going to keep with the most current feeding. Then we can make our way over to the other side and, wait, what am I doing? These are just leftover bits of cantaloupe rind, part of the last feeding. But there should still be maybe, let's see, one sock, two socks. That's all the socks. There should have been also leftover beach towel. I think there were maybe 2 fragments of that in here. Here's the other elastic cuff of the sock, the other sock. I guess that's what's left of the elastic parts. That's what's left of the non-elastic parts. I'd love to see that progress that we're making. But what's unusual is how the beach towel isn't really surfacing as leftovers for some reason. And I mean, it was only 10 days ago we were in here last, and I don't recall observing it being gone. I'm pretty sure I would have made a mental note of that. I'm assuming we saw it at that point, and you know, there was still some of it intact. The fact that it's not surfacing here is interesting, at the very least. I wonder if it could be gone. Alright, you know what? Let's just do one last little quick worm spotting here, and then we can set up the feeding zone with these yummy yellow foods. Alright, well, you know, I think we've just got to write off the beach towel as having been consumed and being gone at this point, because I see no sign of it. And I see lots of leftover paper. So those large chunks of newspaper we put into the other system might look like this when we come back in here next time. Might not. Who knows? But you know what? This dry stuff here too, I think that was a good idea in the other bin to get it right down into the more moist stuff. The stuff where the cantaloupe had been and shared a bit of its moisture. It should help that stuff get rehydrated, get it back in the game. Now we can open up a hole for bringing over our cotton. What's left of our cotton at this point. Man, that's kind of cool. Little sense of accomplishment there, sort of, if I say so myself. Oh my goodness, are we going to have to do another worm sighting over here? I just can't seem to resist. Got to make the hole anyway to get the food in. If we're going to see this many worms, we might as well gawk at them a little bit. Alrighty, so here too, we're going to set up the feeding zone in a way that we're kind of generous on the bedding. I've got newspaper, and I've also got, instead of starting with newspaper at the bottom level, I'm going to use up this bag that flour came in. Oops. You can see there's still a little bit of flour in here, which I'm sure the worms are going to appreciate having as a little extra bite-sized snack. There we go. Oops, okay. Kind of like the way we started with newspaper at the bottom level on the other system. We'll start with this piece of bag. Again, since it's a little bit dry, why not? Let's just squirt it down a little bit. And maybe even before we drop in the food items, we'll try to get the star of the show back in service here. We'll put in one top with the elastic next to one piece that has no elastic, or at least minimal, I think. The stuff that goes around your foot, that part of it. It's incredible how thin they're getting, like see-through almost. So the worms are working this stuff for sure. They're doing a great job of it. And so I guess the elastic stuff will be on the outsides, the non-elastic stuff will be on the insides. And then just to make it really interesting, that's where the food's going to go. Now let's see, I've got some newspaper over here that we can complement this with, but let's dress up the feeding with some grit and worm chow, and we can start bringing in more bedding. Here too, I think there's no harm in being pretty generous with the bedding. You gotta admit, they're just making tons and tons of beautiful castings out of this stuff, so let's fuel that activity with plenty of raw material to do more of the same. Alright, very nice. And I don't even know, does anyone think we did the right thing? Reserving a little bit of extra food for this bin? In other words, do you sense that there is a larger population in this bin than the other bin had? It's hard to say, very hard to say. Could go almost either way, I would think. So, that second piece of newspaper, I don't know, did I moisten it? I guess there's no harm in dropping a little bit of moisture in here just to compensate slightly for some of these more dry materials that we're putting in here. I guess we have the option, if we wanted to start covering this system with something other than just the feeding zone indicator over the last feeding. But it does seem like it's doing okay without any coverings. The material's got a nice moisture content to it throughout. Admittedly, the top surface gets a little bit barren after it dries out, so it doesn't see a great deal of action. Sometimes I even wonder if it's beneficial to have a dry top surface. It's almost like a, I don't know, it's almost like a preventative to keep the worms from running away. They get out on that dry surface and probably get bored of being in such inhospitable conditions after a fairly short period of time, and then they probably just dive right back down, don't even bother crawling up the walls. Not to say that the walls are any more hospitable, they're very dry as well. So that's it, we're done feeding our 2 back and forth worm bins. Yeah, I wasn't even sure at first. I thought that I kind of drew the symbol incorrectly, right? The first version of it says forth and back, right? The first top arrow goes forwards and then it comes back, so I redrew it because I think back should be on top. So the back arrow and forth is the right way to symbolize that expression. Alright everyone, hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.